Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting week of Black History Month program at the prestigious Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Morning Forum. I am your facilitator and host today. My name is Winston Robinson, along co-facilitators, Miss Laura McClellick, Miss Carlinia Ivory Canty, Miss Jackie Edwards Walton, Miss Natalie McElrath, our timekeeper, Ms. Mary Johnson, Mr. Shea Abdul, Mr. Gary Young, Mr. Steve Johnston, our website editor and archivist, our chaplain, Ms. Sarita Sherrill, and our house musician, Dr. Thomas. All right. Yes, our forum runs from 8:30 a.m. to 9:45 a.m., at which point we will pause for announcements from the audience. Announcements can also be sent to Steve Johnston, it's Johnston with a T, at TuesdayForumCharlotte.org. We always begin with a prayer. And what a room to do that today. So we're going to ask, please, Mr. Donald Anthony, would you please lead us in a word of prayer?
Absolutely. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are thankful for the blessing of this day. God, we're thankful for the opportunity to share with one another. God, we're thankful for the opportunity to lead by example. We ask, God, that as we gather on this morning, that you would guide all that we say and do, that your name might be glorified, and that your community might be made even stronger because of what we're able to do and what we're able to share. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. What a segue as well, because today's subject is about Black faith, the smaller faith houses and faith communities in Charlotte, learning their history and their origin stories. And again, a personal story to me. I grew up, I'm a native Charlottean, and I grew up here. My home church is First Mayfield Memorial Baptist Church. My grandparents were founding members after the dismantling of Brooklyn and St. Paul. Many churches split after that, so they founded First Mayfield on Oakland Avenue. And my father, he went to St. Luke. So we would go to Sunday school at First Mayfield and Sunday at St. Luke. And in that journey between, in this world of what Charlotte used to be, which didn't offer the diversity within the Black diaspora that we see now, there was a Catholic church, Our Lady of Consolation. And I will always wonder, who was the member? Like, how did it get here? What's the deal? In this land of just Baptists and Amy Zion, how did this one soul, this island of Catholicism reach Statesville Road? And now at 43, I get to answer have that question answered. So this is Black faith, but not only this Catholicism, we have representation from the Episcopalian Church, Methodist, Presbyterian, Islam, and Church of God and Prophecy. So that is our subject for today. And following the presentations, we will have questions from the audience. And you raise your hand, we will add your name to the list and call your name for your question as we record it. Questions should be no longer than 30 seconds, and questions should be questions. Now, this is the tough part. Answers should be within 2 minutes. I know it's going to get good. I know you ain't going to want to stop. I know it's going to get, oh man, just please. Within that 2 minutes. Yes, also questions, the answers you receive are the answers you have to accept. We don't debate. So, yeah, no back and forth. We have a timekeeper, Miss Natalie McElrath. She will keep us straight. But we got a panel full of pastors. I want to see how this goes. Without further ado.
But without me getting struck by
I know. Without further ado, I would please, we're going to start from my left and come all the way down. If you could introduce yourself. Yes. Yes, we have a streaming audience as well. So we need the mics to have those amplified voices. Just give us a bit about yourself, your faith, and how you found yourself practicing in that denomination.
Sure, yes, thank you.
green light on.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Lisa Pugh, and I am here filling the metaphorically large shoes of Miss Joanne Jenkins, who asked me to come speak in her place today. And for me, it's an honor and a privilege because I love to talk about my church home of 42 years, St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church. I came to Charlotte at around 9-10 years old and moved here, and we were on this, as we talk about our faith journey. My family had been a member of an Episcopal church in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I was born, and we were looking for that similar, at least highly diverse environment. So there was a little bit of a bounce around looking for that place. And we eventually, through a coworker of my dad's, found St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church. It now is celebrating its 142 year anniversary here in Charlotte. A history that spans back to 1883, as we were established by our diocese and a couple of members of St. Peter's Episcopal Church here in Charlotte. We are sort of, if you will, an offshoot of that church. And from 1899 on, we have been a small but mighty force in our community, having established a boys' choir, a industrial school, a Alkali Guild, and the Good Samaritan Hospital here in Charlotte, that those of you in the room who have a longer history than I do here will be familiar with. That hospital closed in the 1950s, I believe, and our old church home actually sits at the site of the Panther Stadium right now. Urban renewal did a lot of things in our community, to say the least, and so we are now, we have at one point been on Hovis Road, speaking to this, how that journey evolves. We were located in that historically Milltown community for some time. And now we are, at 2006, I became a member of a long, proud history of capital fund campaigning. That will be a part of our church's history, hopefully years to come. And we are now building on a site near David Cox Road and Old Statesville Road. So I'm here in part just to brag about how proud and wonderful my church home was, even though it is not the thousands and thousands of members that we think about. I'm wearing a bracelet right now that my daughter gave me at her debutante cotillion. And it says, kind heart, fierce mind, brave spirit. And when I thought about why she thought this about me, I thought about the folks who raised me. And in part, the folks that raised me was the adult community and the ministers and reverends at St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church. So that's about all I have to say about the church. I would be passing out leaflets and things, but we are in the process, due to this great news and this great new project we're embarking upon, we are updating all these things. So the historical documents I have written as our church's historian aren't going to be good enough right now, because in a minute, you're going to have some great updates we're going to add to that. And at that point, I would welcome all of you to come, visit, become a part of our family. In particular, those who perhaps grew up in the Episcopal Church tradition that are looking for something and think there might not be what you need here in Charlotte. I guarantee you there is. I've lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, and Charlotte, North Carolina, and there is a continuity and a mood, and I guess what young people say now, a vibe to what the Episcopal Church has to offer. I'm talking to young people here for a reason, and because we need them too. And that if that's what you want and need and grow from and need for your spiritual growth and development, we most certainly have that. There's a reason I lived in all these places. In my church home, my registration technically as a church member never left St. Michael and All Angels. So I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
That was excellent timing. You had 5 minutes and you took 5 minutes. Each person, each have 5 minutes.
Good morning to each of you. We like to say, peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ronald Shaheed. I'm a member of the Masjid al-Shaheed on Sugar Creek Road. I'm like most that I've met since I came here. I came here in 2016. I would say 9 out of 10 people that I meet are not from Charlotte. I'm not from Charlotte, so anyway, I came here actually from Milwaukee. I moved here from Milwaukee, and my friend, Representative Majid, used to, although I was in Wisconsin for 27 years, born in Florida, by the way. I would get these calls this time of year. He called me and said, Shaheed, he said, the birds, when it's cold, they come south. Why are you still on the tundra in Wisconsin? He did that for 15, 20 years to me. That's how I ended up here. Anyway, I'm of the Islamic faith, a Muslim. Convert from Missionary Baptist Church. My grandparents raised me. My grandfather was a preacher, minister. And they told me when I was growing up, I was going to be just like my grandfather. Turned out to be true. But in Islam, I'm an imam, a minister, imam in Islamic faith. What can I say? I don't get very many opportunities like this to speak to people who are not in my faith. We have our services on Friday, and I'm one of the ones who get up and deliver the sermon or the lecture on Friday. And I'm used to the language of speaking to Muslim audiences. The Friday prayer is the most important group prayer that we say during the week. And we're always talking about how we can be in tune with the Word of God, and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, praise and peace be upon him, and how we can be better citizens in whatever area we're in, because Islam calls on us to be the best of citizens. And in reading the history of America, I found out that the founding fathers, in order to test whether or not the Constitution would be fair to people of all faiths, used Islam as a test case. It's in a book by, I forget her name. It's called Thomas Jefferson's Quran. If you want to look it up, Thomas Jefferson's Quran. And the woman who wrote the book was not a Muslim. She was a researcher. And she said that that's what they did. They wanted to know how can we make it such that when people come to this country, this country, one of the reasons it was established was religious freedom. And so they wanted to make sure that people could have that. So they said, could a Muslim come to America and live their religion to the fullest under the Constitution? And I'm here to bear witness that is true. I was never taught this in school, I lived it. I'll throw out some names: Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan, Imam W.D. Muhammad, et cetera, et cetera. These are people who have become prominent in the United States. And I was blessed to work closely with Imam W.D. Muhammad, who became the leader in 1975, after the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I was able to assist him in interfaith dialogue. It took me to various countries, by the way. I've been to Italy 8 times. Still can't speak Italian. That's a shame, isn't it? I can speak a little bit, but not enough to survive on things. Anyway, I have to mention the name of someone you probably know, Khalil Akbar, Imam Khalil Akbar. I came to know him in 2016. He passed away. May God forgive him of any shortcomings last year. He was my mentor, etc. And so I'll leave the rest to questions afterwards. Thank you.
Before we go to you, Pastor Newberry, we want to welcome Miss Toni Toppins, who is of the Catholic faith. So the question is, Ms. Toppins, introduce yourself, tell us your name, where you're from, and how you found your way to Catholicism. But we'll let you gather your thoughts and proceed with Pastor Newberry, then Reverend Anthony.
Thank you very much. My name is Edward Newberry. I'm a retired pastor of Memorial Presbyterian Church on Batesville Road, which I had the privilege of serving for 36 years. Some say 37, depending on how you count the months. But it was 36 for sure. My family moved to Charlotte when I was 12 years old. We moved here from Decatur, Georgia, because my father had received a call to become pastor of the South Tryon Presbyterian Church on South Tryon Street, right in front of Brook Hill Village, right before you get to Wee Mountain Road. And that's where we moved in 1958. Later on, he received a call to become pastor of the Brandon Presbyterian Church, which was in the old Greenville neighborhood off of between Oakmont Avenue and Statesville Avenue. South Tryon Church was a member of Mecklenburg Presbyterian, which was the Southern Presbyterian Church. Brandon was a member of Catawba Presbyterian, which was a Presbyterian Church USA, basically Northern Presbyterian Church. And that's the church that I was ordained from by Catawba Presbyterian in 1971. The Black Presbyterians in this area owe their origins to the establishment of Catawba Presbyterian. And to understand Catawba Presbyterian, you really got to understand the history of this country, because Catawba was established on October 6, 1866, which was about 18 months after the Civil War. Catawba was established in our neighboring county, up in Iredell County, somewhere north of Statesville, I think. Ironically, about 3 white ministers who were members of the Southern Presbyterian Church, but ran into problems because they wanted to serve the newly emancipated blacks in this area. They were members of Concord Presbyterian at that particular time. But they established the Catawba Presbyterian in 1866, and it began to grow from there. The major focus is Mecklenburg County, according to your instructions. So I would say that the focus of Black Presbyterians in Mecklenburg County, which became quite prominent, is due to two things. One is a bit unfortunate and embarrassing, but you have to know, you have to accept history. And that is the fact that before emancipation, a lot of black people who were enslaved, affiliated with, attended, and some even became members of white congregations, although they had what we would really have to admit was secondary membership. But they were affiliated with those churches. After the Civil War and after the establishment of Catawba Presbytery, many of those people who were affiliated with the white Presbyterian churches left to become organized in their own congregations, which was a pattern really across the South. It's not anything unusual here. So that was one of the reasons, and so people who had been affiliated with, some had even been on the rolls of these churches, gathered, became fellowships, and eventually became chartered congregations under Catawba Presbytery. That's the first reason. Second reason was the establishment of a school, originally named Freedmen's College of North Carolina, then renamed Biddle Institute, and then later renamed as it is now Johnson C. Smith University. That school was established for the main purpose of educating newly emancipated black people. Its focus was to train people to be two things: teachers and preachers. Teachers and preachers. Like most of what we now have as HBCUs, Biddle Institute really started off giving basic education. A lot of these schools had very, very sophisticated names, colleges, universities, etc. But they were basically giving basic education. Remember, they're dealing with people who are illiterate. So to hear the name college, you have to take that with a slight grain of salt. Nevertheless, that was the foundation for the establishment of many churches in our area, because the training of ministers at Biddle Institute meant that there were men, which was basically what it was then, available to go out and serve these churches as ministers, catechists, some teachers. So that's what happened. In Mecklenburg County, right now, there are, I would guess, around 15 or 16 Black Presbyterian churches, most of which came out of or were established by Catawba Presbytery. Catawba Presbytery lasted for 122 years, from 1866 to 1989. And then it was because of denominational stuff. It would take me 3 days to tell you all of that. We are now part of the Charlotte Presbytery. As was mentioned, there are a number of names that you might recognize if I had the time to go through, but I'll save the rest for questions.
Thank you. My name is Donald Anthony. I pastor Grace Lutheran Church in Concord, North Carolina. I'm here today because Reverend Quentin Polson, who pastors Prince of Peace Lutheran Church here in Charlotte, is not able to be here. So it's an honor to be here as well. And as I, in a few moments, share a little bit about Lutheranism in Charlotte, I'm just going to say what he said, because that's very similar to what happened in the Lutheran Church as well. I've served 27 years at Grace and 25 years at Crown and Glory Lutheran Church in Salisbury. I'm a fourth generation Lutheran. There's not a whole lot of Black Lutherans. You don't see that very often. The one congregation in Kannapolis, Mount Calvary, that I grew up in, I went to Lenoir-Rhyne College, now Lenoir-Rhyne University. My first call was to Baltimore, Maryland. I was there for 9 years. I went to seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. I came to Charlotte in 1996 to help start a new Lutheran church on the north side of the city. And we started a school around Sharon Amity Road that lasted for a couple of years. Someone else came in after me, and I left and went to Concord. Some history that I found that I think is interesting is that the first Black Lutheran church in Charlotte is Mount Zion Lutheran Church, established around 1896 in the Cherry neighborhood. There was a North Carolina synod that worked to reach out to the freed black men. That's what they call them, the freedmen who were recently released slaves. William Philo Pfeiffer was a prominent African-American preacher who was ordained in Baltimore in the 1890s and came here and served to help several churches that were downtown Charlotte. And then with urban renewal and things that were happening, those churches merged. Eventually, Prince of Peace was established. Mrs. Stevenson was a member of Prince of Peace. She was the first church that she was a part of was, I think it was St. Andrews. And St. Andrews was a culmination of several churches in downtown. And when urban renewal took place, those churches, as with other churches in different denominations, moved to Beatties Ford Road. An interesting thing about William Philo Pfeiffer is that he and the first pastor of Grace, Daniel Koontz, who was the first African-American to be ordained in the Lutheran Church, they gathered together with two other pastors, and they attempted to form, and did form, the first African-American Lutheran Synod in 1889. And they were at Concord. They had gone to the North Carolina Synod to ask for support. And of course, the larger church did not have support for them, told them they should start their own synod, and they did. Reverend Pfeiffer and Reverend Koontz were the most educated of those four pastors. Dr. Koontz died of poisoning a year and a half into the organization. Philo took over, he was treasurer, and then it lasted for about another year and a half. Work continued. Congregations merged together. In 1962, there were 500 people gathered together for Vacation Bible School. Mrs. Sarah Stevenson was a part of that. And that's when they decided that there was a need to start another church, another Lutheran church. So they came together, formed Prince of Peace in 1964. And that church is still in existence. Quentin Bolton is pastoring there today, and they're still reaching out into the community. So that's just a little bit of that history, how the Black Lutheranism got started here in Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Tony.
Good morning, everybody. I apologize for being late. I think you all are going to soon learn that I must be a pinch hitter from way back. But a lot of people don't know that I am Catholic. How did I come to Catholicism? I think I was making notes, and I think the fair thing to say would be I came to Catholicism by way of my mother's godparents. My mother grew up in Greenville, North Carolina, and she had seven siblings. She was the baby. And by the time she was the age to normally get baptized, I think in a Lutheran church, both of her parents had died. Her siblings were about getting their lives together, and she had a godfather who was Catholic. And so he took over the role of getting her baptized into a Christian faith, and his faith was Catholicism. So that's how I came through her to be Catholic. My father was Baptist and named me a Catholic because I practiced both evenly as a child. And I thank God for that, and I will talk about that later. So I was baptized Catholic, actually really at birth, because back in the days when I was born, I was like a 6-month preemie, so I'm very fortunate to even be here. So whereas my mother would possibly have thought to have me christened in the Baptist church, because of the circumstances of my birth, the priest who had been her priest in North Carolina, we lived in Virginia at that time, rushed to her side because they did not think that I was going to make it. And so I was christened literally at birth. I received what we call in the Catholic faith last rites. And so once I was christened and he kind of took me in, and that priest kind of followed me then as his baby. I was later christened in Greenville, North Carolina, at the Black Catholic congregation that my mother grew up in, and I was christened Catholic. I found out in my little mind that I was Catholic when I was about 4 years old. When, as a child, I noticed these ladies walking around with the veils and the long black robes. Obviously, they were nuns, but as an only child with a huge imagination, I didn't see them as positive. I'll just put it that way. And my best friend and I had put together all these stories about how you had to stay away from these, and we would literally find ways to duck and dodge these ladies as they walked. Very nice ladies, they didn't deserve it, but that never stopped me. And so this is where I learned, and I'll pass this on, this is where I learned that God has jokes, because at about 5, what I didn't know was that was right, 2 years after desegregation became law, and in the United States, and the bishop of the Diocese of Richmond, the diocese that I was a part of, was apparently a renegade in the Catholic Church when it came to desegregation and integration and that kind of thing. And he declared that every segregated Catholic school would end. He gave them 2 years, they weren't doing anything, and he said, okay, when school starts, you will have every black child who is eligible and whose parents choose to have them in that church, in that school, you will have them in that school or you'll deal with me. Well, bless my heart, I was the only black child in my community. I ended up in school with the same lady that I had been ducking and dodging for at least a year. So how did Catholicism come to me? That's pretty much how it happened. I'm gonna give this back in case you want me to later talk about Catholicism in general and in Charlotte.
We got a lot of time.
Oh.
We're gonna have a great conversation. So Ms. Nathalie, that was 5 minutes. So, but we will, eventually get there. We have our first question from an audience member, Ms. Mary Johnson.
Yes, I wanted to know, what is the difference between the Catholic and Episcopal? They seem so similar with priests and all, so what is the real difference?
Wow, I'm no expert on that. I can tell you what I think the difference is. During the Protestant Reformation, different churches broke away from the Catholic Church. I think the Anglican Church was one of the first to break away. And as is normal, when you break away from something that you've been a part of forever, you have your reason for breaking away, but you're still entrenched in the symbolism, the ritual of that original church. And so the Anglicans broke away, I think under Henry VIII, is that right? Am I right? Okay. And so with that breaking away, those who followed that move were able to establish the tenets, or to erase, we shall say, the tenets of the Catholic Church, particularly around divorce and remarriage. They were able to move that away, to lessen that, but they didn't necessarily remove the ritual and the core beliefs. The other thing I will say is, and I think I'm right, I've got a friend here who can tell me no or yes, Jan Lawler. I also think that priests in the Anglican Church can, under certain circumstances, become priests in the Catholic faith. They can make that exchange back. There are certain things that would have to be in place for them, or that they would have to agree to. But so in saying that, you understand that the two are still very, very closely tied. Does that help?
As a current member of the Episcopal Church, I would co-sign everything you have said and talk about my current day differences in practice. We do not confess. We do not have confessional. We have we say our prayers, our Nicene Creed, all of that acknowledges the Anglican Church for certain, and our yielding to that doctrine. But we do not practice confessional. We do not do rosary. And what you said about tenets of divorce do relate directly to the history of why we formed in the first place. But a lot of the service itself, particularly those of our congregations that practice a high service, if you can imagine, my experience as an Episcopalian, as an Alkalite, Reverend Edward King, who I grew up with, insisted on a high service with children ranging from, like, we just learned how to walk to about to graduate from high school, because he just felt very passionate about the order of service in general, which is very similar. And what that means, there's a certain emotional pomp, circumstance, and reverent approach there is sometimes to some of the ways Anglican churches in general differ from some of the more charismatic. And so I would say that main difference in current practice is the whole issue behind whether or not you pray, you have the ability, or whether you should pray directly to God under certain circumstances, or whether or not that has to go through another person, up through another person, up through another person, is most certainly a difference. And then I would say culturally, what I've experienced in the Episcopal Church I've always attended, I've only attended once, so, I think there might be a little bit of a difference in culture in how tall, deep, and wide the hierarchy is, as far as just structural hierarchy and our rights to speak and perhaps have a certain level of opinionatedness and that, and the input we get to have from a diocesan perspective into our church. So that is my perception of my my small little 42-year perception. I'm looking around the room at people who look like they've got double that or maybe a lot less, and I'm thinking they might come visit, so I want to encourage you.
So we have another question from
you, and then
okay. So I'm gonna just go ahead and say it for the streaming audience in the room. I would love to know about some of the distinctions that separate your faith or your denomination in practice, those unique details, the beautiful practices that you all have in your faith that showcase that distinction of who you are, basically, as an institution. And also, if you drop a word that we might not use every day, kind of take us through it. I had to look at my phone and see what acolyte was. So yeah, again, this is, I'm a novice in this world, so kind of help us out with that.
Absolutely, I apologize. Alkalite was, is, if you've seen for those of you who have never been to a Catholic or Episcopal service, if you've seen somewhere, the young people and or adults that carry candles, crosses, and how there's an up and down, up a center aisle, our churches, unless they were built differently, you can't afford to change it, or you don't build it new for yourself, there's a center aisle, and you see that process. the young people and or adults that are in usually red or black or one of our church colors with a white kind of drape over it, kind of a sex smock almost looking thing over it. That's an alkalite. And then we also have what you call a lay reader, the folks that read our scriptures. So in that sense, we don't differ from anybody else. There's always a lesson, Bible lesson. But what we do is there is a certain symbolism, and I'm not a theologian, I'm one of the people that's not a minister here, but we are to process to a certain point in the church in that center aisle, so as to include and be speaking within the church to the church about what that lesson is for the day. And that occurs, and there's some other details there that I would probably only know from being an alkalite. That's another place where I, as a African-American female of my age and stage, was very blessed to be in the church that I was in. There have been every church in the world can relate to the extent to which at certain points in time and certain points in history was not necessarily a thing for a young female of any sort, but most certainly African-American, to even be allowed to be that close to the gospel reading and to the process of the teaching and being that close to our priest or minister or reverend. You know, there's a lot of churches that still carry conventions about that being not a thing. So, you know, to be in the 80s and 90s and be able to carry the book of the gospel and process, which is walking up and down the aisle during your service, was a big deal for me.
That wasn't for you. I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to hear from everybody. Up to 2 minutes. Yeah, just some of those distinctions that happens in your practice, if you like to answer.
Well, for me, in Islam, the only distinguishing quality that you see, as opposed to perhaps Christianity, is our mode of prayer. We practice prayer 5 times a day, and it's done in a prescribed way. Prayer for us is first of all congregational prayer. And the congregational prayer has to be done a certain way. And in the prayer, the leader of the prayer, the imam, has to recite the holy book, the Quran. But then there's the individual prayers we call dua prayer, which is myself asking God for something. That's called dua prayer. And probably, and I grew up in the Baptist church, I know that our dua prayer is similar to the prayer in the Baptist church. But for us, we call it salat. Salat is congregational prayer. The obligatory prayer, the prayer that you should do, must do 5 times a day, is a group prayer. So that's the most distinguishing quality.
This is working. All of us, except for my brother here, are really a part of the Protestant faith that withdrew out of the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century. So we have that broad umbrella in common, and then we start splitting. I used to say humorously that when the disciples walked out of the upper room for the Last Supper, the church started dividing and hadn't stopped yet. There's all kinds of divisions, and it's represented here on this panel. Presbyterianism is a part of that broader Protestantism, but it has its own distinctions. It's a part of what's understood as to be the Reformed faith, Reformed theology, that has some basic tenets of belief, not very many, some of them really not that sophisticated, that guide our thinking in terms of God, our relationship to God, and our relationship to each other. Our denominational identity is pretty much representative in terms of governance. We elect people to make decisions on 4 different levels: a local church, a regional level, such as the Catawba Presbytery was, and then a more broader level, a Senate, and then the national level of the General Assembly. And in all of those levels, the representation is on the part of ministers and ruling elders. Ruling elders are lay people who are elected to serve in the local congregations, and then they serve further on the church. Our order of service is basic and sort of really kind of simple. It is centered on the Word of God. We believe that the Word of God is the central focus of why we gather. And that's why the sermon is really a very, very significant part. We also do not have individual confessions to a priest. We have a corporate confession of sin, which is important for everyone to share in together. The interesting thing about that, you can join in that confession of sin and say, well, I didn't do that. Why am I saying this? But one thing you can also think of, well, I didn't do it, but somebody did. So sometimes you have to think of confessing on behalf of somebody else. But that's one of the things. We do believe in written confessions of faith. We have a book of confessions that really spell out the doctrines and the theology that the church is guided by. I'm a minister. I was ordained in 1971, and we serve at the call of congregations with the approval of the presbytery, and we serve also at the pleasure of congregations with the approval of the presbytery. I guess that might be enough for right now.
So I was thinking about what are some of the significant things about the Lutheran Church, and of course one of them is the fact that Martin Luther, who was a Roman Catholic priest, began to question some of the means of salvation. And so that helped start that Protestant protesting what was going on. And those folk who were following Martin Luther, that's the followers of Luther, and then that's where the name Lutheran came from. One of talk of Black Lutheran, and why are you a Black Lutheran? And why are you Lutheran and Black? None of my friends were, except the ones I had at church. But one of the things that we learned is that our salvation is based not on what we do, but on what God has already done for us in Christ. And so I always felt like that was an important message for us to share within our community. I grew up, like I said, with my grandmother going to the Pentecostal church because I loved the music and I loved how active it was. But I left scared because I wasn't sure if I was saved or not, if I was going to make it. And they talk about, are you saved, Donnie? And I'm thinking, well, I had some thoughts. And I love my grandmother, but I watch what she did sometimes. And so you saved, but that's what you're going to do? You saved, but that's what you're going to say? So in the Lutheran Church, I learned very clearly, because that was one of the things that Martin Luther struggled with his own salvation. He did all kinds of crazy things. He laid on a bed of nails because he was trying to please God, and finally had the revelation that his salvation was based on not what he did or didn't do, but on what God had done for him. So that message has been really a strong message. Grace alone, faith alone, scripture alone is part of the components of the Lutheran Church, which has kept me there, and I think that's really significant. And the last thing that I want to say is that the Lutheran Church has been characterized as a singing church, and we do a lot of singing. We do a lot of singing out of the hymn book, because what Martin Luther did was to take the mass, the Latin mass that they use in the Catholic Church. The priest knew Latin, but the Germans did not know Latin. So the priest was doing the service, and the congregation had no clue what was going on. And so he made the service, he redid the service so that the people could understand it. And we Black Lutherans learned it, years later. And so we're singing these German songs because Martin Luther had done that for the German community. And so one of the things that we have learned to be able to do is to still be a singing church, but let's sing our own songs. Make sure the songs teach the right message, but so we have incorporated Black music into our singing, even changed some of the liturgy as well. So that's some of the significance I would share about the Lutheran Church.
Man. Ms. Tony?
There's enough of that.
Yeah, so most of the history of the way Catholicism evolved in terms of its community and its service has really been talked about, because up until I was right around 10 years old, I think, maybe a little bit younger, if I didn't see the priest somewhere else, I wouldn't have known what he looked like, because I only saw the back of his head in church, because everything happened in front of the altar. So we were all looking the same way, facing the altar. But I didn't know what he was saying because he was speaking in Latin. Now, in school, I had to learn a little Latin, but not enough to have a conversation. But at any rate, and it was moving so fast, I had no idea. I grew up in a Polish Catholic community, so that was doubling down. You know, again, that's why I say, thank God I was a Catholic, because literally, culturally, I would go to Mass on Sunday. We had 2 Masses, one at a small community church near my home at 8, and the regular Mass at the larger church a little farther down the road, I think at 11. I would go to the 8 o'clock Mass, cut out, go straight down the alley to the Baptist church, and be there in time to come in with everybody else and to sit with my grandmother and all my cousins. Now, the good thing about that was, and really up until I was an adult, even through college, I would go to Mass out of obligation at the earliest one I could find, and in Durham, I would scoot over to St. Joseph's AME and have church. So there was Mass, and then there was church, right? So now if you move down through time, you'll find that during Vatican II, the Pope at that time, Pope John the 23rd, came to understand, and those around him, that we should be about the people, not the reverse. So he turned the priest around. He said that the Mass should be of the people and should be understood by the people. So you should speak in whatever the language of that community happens to be. And then finally, have those cultural things like music. And in the Black Catholic Church, that goes to music, dance, liturgical dance, the changing of what you see in terms of the representation of Christ to look like you know? So those things changed and remain to this day. The last thing I will say is my mother used to call Our Lady of Consolation, where I go here, the Our Lady of Consolation Apostolic Baptist Holiness Run Down the Aisles Catholic Church.
Man, this is such a beautiful conversation. Oh, y'all, but we gotta pick up the pace. So, Miss Nathalie, you got a tough job in front of you. Please, questions, 30 seconds, responses, 1 minute. Miss Jackie.
Yes, Tony, can you go on and tell us a little bit about the history of the Catholic Church in Mecklenburg County, and also for the rest of you, where women kind of fit in?
Well, remembering that I was not born and raised in this community, what I do know is that Our Lady of Consolation went through a couple of iterations. It was born out of a small group of Black Catholics who wanted to pray and to have Mass among themselves. They started doing that in some homes. Then they ultimately had a small church where First Baptist West sits now. I think that was St. Mary's Catholic Church. And out of that, they ultimately grew to what is now Our Lady of Consolation, when they brought two Catholic communities together to form Our Lady of Consolation, and ultimately to start a school for Black children. In terms of women, I think the Catholic Church is still struggling with its role. I heard, that was Jan. I didn't have to look. The Catholic Church is still struggling in the role of women in the church. And now, with the Pope that is there now, it is rising to the top. That struggle is really coming to the top.
1 minute? Yeah. 1 minute.
I think perhaps my youth might limit my ability to answer this because my perception within the Episcopal Church is that, in my own church, is that I have never been limited in my ability to be involved. I think my ability to be involved was limited by my own abilities. In my 4 years as of this year, I would have been a youth, an acolyte, a youth minister, if you will, or head of a youth group, a vestry member, a capital fund campaign co-chair, a historian, a vestry member again, and while being a historian, and now merely historian, and that has been my involvement in my church, and I'm obviously here as an African American female representing my St. Michael and All Angels. So I think there have been struggles, there continue to be struggles everywhere, but my particular church home has not sought to limit my involvement.
Vestry is church council. Thank you. That's Andy.
I mentioned about Mecklenburg County being a focal point for Black Presbyterians, and to make it very concrete, the first congregation, there's debate as to which one was first, but one of the earliest of those churches is actually represented here in this room today. These two people back here, right here, they are part of First United Presbyterian Church, which began in around 1866 and 1867 as the Colored Presbyterian Church of Charlotte. And then it became 7th Street Presbyterian Church sometime after that. We churches in Mecklenburg County began again around 1866, and they developed from that point on. Most of them were organized between 1866 and the 1880s, 1890s. And in terms of women, we have full participation of women. In fact, one of the confessions of our church says quite clearly, God calls women and men to all of the ministries of the church.
I think I talked a little earlier about the first Black Lutheran church in Charlotte, Mount Zion, in 1896, and kind of shared that history with Reverend Philo as well. There are different strands, I'll say, of Lutheran church. And in some of the Lutheran churches, women are ordained and have all kinds of opportunities. And then some of the other Lutheran churches, women are not ordained, but they are encouraged to be teachers and work in different areas in that way. So it kind of goes across the board in terms of that, the women representation.
Thank you so much. Mr. Combs.
Except for the Nation of Islam and the Catholic Church, each of the others, your faith grew out of Anglican Church and the European example of what Christianity is. And we know that that was a bastardized version of the original church. But I'm confused as to why we don't hear any even earned PhD ministers in the Black church talking about the original church, the Coptic church, nor do they reference the Ethiopian Bible. So my question is, why is that?
I won't pretend to speak for all folk on that issue, but that is in fact one of the oldest of Christian faith is the Ethiopian and the Coptic church belief that some disciples actually went to start that church. In terms of the relationship between American Protestantism and the Ethiopian church, that's a whole. Ethiopian church is closer to Eastern Orthodox, I believe, rather than it is to Protestantism. But so it's really just not a part of our understanding of what Christianity is. It's not dismissed. It's not ignored. I mean, it's not. You just consider it illegitimate. It's just another form of the Christian faith, which is, I mean, you got Christian faith in a whole lot of places that we really don't fully understand. That would be my response.
I like your response.
All right.
I like your response.
Ms. Darnell, if you want to specify to a certain member, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, everybody's done.
Okay, everybody's done.
Oh, okay.
They're all done.
Ms. Darnell.
Okay, do I have it on to you? To the right.
Jasmine, go ahead, Val, Jasmine.
Okay, I got it. All right. This may be to Reverend Newberry more so, but Mrs. Pugh, you mentioned that the Panther Stadium is now where your home site used to be. And to Reverend Newberry, in terms of First United and 7th Street Presbyterian Church, I was wondering how urbanization and the relocation of churches in downtown has affected probably the Presbyterian Church, because you mentioned there are 15 to 16 churches. There were more before that, prior to merging and division and all of that. So how has that affected? Thank you.
But within the city of Charlotte, there really were not that many more within the city of Charlotte. But urban renewal did have an impact on some of our churches. One in particular that was demolished was the Brooklyn Presbyterian Church on McDowell Street, where the Admiral's Park Hotel in that area right there. And of course, the Brooklyn Church was in the very within walking distance of the original United House of Prayer and St. Paul Baptist. So it was a victim of organization in that part, and actually became part of 7th Street to become First United. I can't think offhand of any other Presbyterian church that had to relocate because of the Brooklyn urban renewal. But there have been, churches that have merged and relocated over the years. The church that I served, Memorial, grew out of a merger of two congregations. Emmanuel Church was started in 1876, and Biddleville Church which was started in 1881. And they merged, but that didn't have anything to do with their renewal. That was church stuff.
All right, Jasmine.
You might as well keep the mic, because this is kind of like a follow-up. Thank you, because that was literally the question that I was going to ask. How did Second Presbyterian actually end up staying to this day in downtown Charlotte?
7th Street. First United Church?
Yes. And even the one, is that the one across from that police station?
Yes.
No, this is the one that was across from the Museum of the New South.
Yes, that one. How did it stay where it's at?
There's two members of the church back there. They might have a better understanding than I. I'll give it one word: stubborn, persistent, and decided we're here to stay. There were, I think, back in the 60s, there was some thinking about maybe we should relocate and go elsewhere, but I think the membership saw itself as being in a historic location and very, very proud of that location. That church has been there, I would say, I do know that building was occupied by that congregation, because I've seen a photograph of a meeting of the Synod of Catawba, that's a whole other thing, in 1888, I believe it was, on the steps of that church. So it's been there for a long time, but I think it was the pride of being at that location. That also was a part of what used to be First Ward of Charlotte, which was a black neighborhood. So, but I think is that a good answer, members from First Ward?
That's a good answer.
All right. Ms. Pugh.
I think as for urban renewal, I think it can be an issue of wealth as well as an issue of will. I think Urban Renewal did a lot of things to a lot of people and entities. It wasn't just my own particular church, but in my instance, speaking to the question of what it caused and what happened to our church as a result, there was a lot of years of struggle. There was a lot of years where the quote unquote stubbornness of my predecessors had to come into play, not just to decide to hold a certain location, but to exist and survive, period. Our membership has gone up and down because as you lose a church home, you lose land, you lose that physical home, it becomes much more of a struggle to attract and retain. And then those core people who will be there no matter what, who want their children in that no matter what, are what sustains that. So we are particularly a group that has struggled.
Thank you so much. Yep. St. Paul in Brooklyn, disbanded. Gary Young.
All right, I guess it's gonna be alluded to all of you, particularly the ones that are not from here, who have come from other places, even if it was when you were 12 from Decatur. What do you find the biggest difference within your denomination and in your community here in Charlotte and your involvement in the ecosystem of Charlotte politically, socially, versus where you come from?
I know they can't answer that.
Well, you should,
No,
man. Y'all gonna start back into these questions.
The main thing for me is having been raised in a Catholic church that did not reflect my culture. I didn't realize how difficult it was until I went somewhere else. And so as I got older, I had decided that if I did not find a church that worshiped and found Christ within my culture, I would go somewhere else. So I've never been afraid to be something other than Catholic, as glad that I am Catholic. But I have to have my culture. Church for African Americans, I believe, is also a place for liberation, where liberation has to be found and taught. And so in our African American congregations of Catholicism, we typically can find that liberation being taught and being referenced. And so without that, I have to move on. So that is one of the things I find different here, and I have been fortunate enough to find in some other places that I've moved along the way.
My biggest memory as a member of St. Michael's versus being a member of St. George's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Charlotte is a different place now than it was then. So the church I was born into, St. George's, was actually an integrated church, a fully integrated church. There were black families, there were white families, there were biracial families of different sorts at that particular church. To this day, I don't see that as much in the Episcopal Church in Charlotte. What I see is folks making, in my opinion, a choice that they have to make that suits them about what they want to choose as a church family. But the big difference is my church, I was born and up to 10 years old in a church that was fully integrated. So that's the big difference for me. Though I don't see projects across church lines to be in any way, I saw them to be very beneficial as well. So, but definitely the integratedness of the Episcopal congregations is what I don't see as much of here.
I feel that a loss on some level of being the odd man out, I feel. And that's not new to me. But I participate in dialogue across the world, really. And the thing I can say is we all have the same problem. How to live our faith in this challenging world. And there's no more, as you all know, the last election, etc., tells us that we're going to be challenged even more to live our faith.
In terms of involvement in the bottom, life of Charlotte. And I can't speak to Decatur. When I left Decatur, I was just having fun. I can't speak to that. But Black Presbyterians have really been significant people here in our county in sometimes quiet ways. Let me give you a fascinating statistic. Years ago, before integration, there were 7 black high schools in Mecklenburg County. 3 in the city and 4 in the county. Out of those 7 black high schools, 5 were led by principals who were Presbyterian. That's an interesting statistic. Presbyterians have been involved, of course, in the school desegregation. We all know the story of Arthur Count Scoggins and her struggles to integrate Harding High School. The very, very famous Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education case that went to the Supreme Court that established busing in 1971 was brought by the parents of a child, and their parents were Presbyterian minister and his wife, Reverend Dr. Deonta Swarm. So that's just a small thing, and I could go on with some other things of people who have contributed, but that's just a sample.
Smith alumni.
Smith alumni, I'll give that to you, Mr. Coombs.
So I would just share a little bit about where I have seen the Lutheran Church in Charlotte, Prince of Peace in particular, become more involved in the community. Again, as a small Lutheran church growing up in Kannapolis, North Carolina, we kind of stood, we did our own thing. We did church. We did church the way we were taught to do church. Not many of our friends came to the Lutheran Church because they looked at the Lutheran Church as a little standoffish. The worship style was different. At Prince of Peace, what I know of Prince of Peace now and what I've seen over the years was more involvement in the political world, more involvement in the social world, and Sarah Stevenson was certainly a major part of that as well. And so we're just thankful to see us branching out and interacting, worshiping with the members of the community as well, because that hasn't always been the case in the small Lutheran church.
Before we go to Ms. Nathalie, I'm up here struggling. Please let me know how to address you properly. I'm slipping through pastor or reverend. It's just innately in me to, see the leader as pastor, and I don't want to be incorrect. So, Pastor Anthony.
I told the church, if they had that same question, you can call me anything that you're comfortable with in front of children. Reverend is fine.
Reverend Newberry.
The same, except that if you were talking about me performing in my role, imam.
All right, Ms. Nathalie.
It's gonna be tough for you to answer this in 1 minute, but you might be able to give us enough information so I can understand. There are so many churches in Charlotte. I wonder, how do you manage to stay afloat? Because I don't know how you pay your bills. I mean, you're such small congregations. What's your toughest thing that you have to do as a small congregation?
You want to address that to someone in particular?
Well, I'll just begin.
All of those are ahead of it.
Okay, I'll just begin. We pray a lot, right? And God shows up. We have seniors, a lot of seniors who learn the art and practice the art of tithing, and that's how the congregation makes it. And then we have the second church that I serve, and that's it. We have pastors who are serving 2 churches because one congregation may be so small they cannot afford to pay a full-time pastor, and we have pastors who are in dual roles. They're working a full-time job somewhere as well as serving as a pastor in order to help the congregation make it.
Church that I served for many years was fortunate enough to be self-supporting, and so we paid our own bills, and they fed me for 36 years and kept a roof over my family's head. Basically, it had to do with trying to be sincere stewards of what God has blessed us with, to give as you could. And so we were blessed to have loyal and good giving members over the years. But many of our churches as was indicated, are served by part-time ministers now. Some doing other jobs, some serving 2 churches on yoke fields, what we call yoke fields. And it is a struggle. It is becoming tougher and tougher as time goes on.
Ditto.
I would say a ditto as well. However, also with what you're talking about, our presence of a part-time priest to make our ends meet, and much prayer. Also, that stubbornness that we've alluded to. When gaps are there as a result of those resources being limited, we have to pitch in and do the work. Is what I have observed from my congregation, St. Michael and All Angels. When the grass needed to get cut, if you couldn't afford to pay, guess what? Somebody has to get out and cut the grass. When your children need alkalite robes and you can't afford to buy the hoity-toity fancy ones, a woman in your church that sews, or even a woman in your church that doesn't sew, sits down and helps, and we get it done. So it's that stubbornness as far as and when we're doing it to the glory of God, even when we're not an expert, we figure out how to do it in a great way.
And I'm going to pass this question off to my friend Sam Cooper, who was supposed to be here today. Sam is a past parish council president, so if you could hand him that mic, maybe, please.
Mr. Sam, we got a minute.
That's fine. I'm going to take a minute. The grace of God is the answer to that question. Okay? We have many revenue streams in the Catholic Church. And one of the things that you won't hear us talk about a lot, or the priests talk about a lot, is tithing. We depend on our people to give, to be good stewards, to give their talents, their treasures, and their time. Over the years, the church has made some great investments. We get revenue, like I say, several revenue streams. We have sometimes what we call orders, and that's a group of priests or a group of nuns. And their ministries are separate from the actual parishes or the churches. Sometimes they give and make sure the church stays afloat.
All right, y'all, this is the lightning round. We have Charlene, Tina, Miss Carlenia, and Miss Laura. Ask the person directly and try to make it as quick as you can.
Good morning, and thank you guys thank you all for being here. I've learned so much, and I've been writing so many notes, and I got so many questions. However, I'm gonna try to put it down in one particular comment or statement. With so many cultural differences, and I'm coming from a standpoint of church and state, and I know there's a thin line between it, and they always say that. I want to know, what is the one thing that can bring all of these denominations together? Because we're out here doing a lot of work in the community, and we keep screaming faith organizations, and how can we get you to be more cohesive together so that we can get more done in our communities?
Whoa. It's best if maybe one or two people answer, because we really are learning.
I think the only way that we're going to do it is to reach out to each other. That's number one. And to remember that our first goal, our primary goal, is bringing hearts, minds, souls to Christ. And if we're all really doing that, and we all really believe and understand that the same Jesus that we talk about in the Catholic Church is the one that's being taught in the Lutheran Church, and the same people have the same problems that sit in the pews in our churches, we can come together. We can, because we've got a lot more in common than we have that's different.
I agree with that, and I would just say one of the things that have to be done is to graciously recognize the differences that we have and see them as legitimate but not divisive.
I think while there are differences, the similarity is we are all God's children. So I'm not more than you, you're not more than me. There might be more money, there might be more square feet in a home. There might be a different side of town. But if I look at you as if you're God's creation just as I am, then working together isn't as difficult.
Right.
Tina.
Quickly, and this is to anybody, just wondering how your houses of worship or institutions are addressing issues that are important to young people, specifically abortion and gay rights.
Yeah, I'll take that. In terms of abortion, which is a tremendously divisive issue, and a lot of people struggle with that, I would say that our church is, for all intents and purposes, pro-choice, but we recognize the fact that that is a decision between a woman, the conscience of the Lord, and her doctor. But that's where we are. In terms of youth, it's a struggle because youth are not gravitating to church as they once did. Youth didn't have a choice. You went to church if you were breed. But now, and there's so many things competing with their attention and their time that is very, very difficult. But we still have to struggle because the youth represent the future.
All right, Ms. Carlenia.
I really have a statement. First, I want to say thank you, Reverend Newberry, because my late husband thought the world of you, Titus Ivory. Yes, and I also want to say that Catherine Hawkins, who was Darnell's aunt and my late husband's aunt, and listen, I'll share these papers with you, who was a member of First United, told me that they built that church at night, brick by brick. And they vowed, because often the city and others would come and try to buy that land, and they refused, and you said stop. They refused to sell that. Now, we went to her homegoing in the late December. She was 100 years old. And I want you to know they have built onto the church rather than sell it. So that's something, they were stubborn. So, and again, thank you all for what you do.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ivory. Bring us home, Ms. Laura.
Okay, my last question, and this is to the three ministers, the three reverends. Elevation, you are familiar with Elevation Church, and they are bringing in a lot of young people. What can we possibly do to get our kids back in our churches? We are absent at our church, so we need to get some learning.
And we do. I think we all do struggle with that as well. Elevation, some of those other larger churches entertain, and that's part of the challenge. I think it's important that we speak to our young people and be open to some of the things that they really want to do and how they even want to be involved in worship. We can't entertain, we can't do it on a level of elevation, but we can adjust and we can listen to what our young people are saying and enable them to be involved in some of the planning of the worship.
Tell you what, my childhood church was 11-2. Right now, First Baptist, 10-11. So that helps. I will agree with what has been said. I will just add that if we're serious, one of the things we have to do is truly form them in faith.
In our holy book, the Quran, it says that Noah invited his son aboard the ark, and his son decided to take himself to a mountain. And of course, the mountain was flooded too. And I think the flood is the culture. The culture. We have a problem with the culture, all of us. It's a terrible culture. The scripture says that place where the garden, the tree in the middle of the garden that mixes good and evil, that's this society. Pope John Paul said, this Western culture is a culture of death. And so our children are out there. And another thing our Holy Book says is we should focus on taking care of the big shameful deeds, only fall into small faults. If our young people are going to come back with us, we got to get off these small fault things. You know, they're out there and they're having these experiences. They have to know that we're not going to condemn them and talk about them because they fell into small faults.
All right, look at that, 10 o'clock on the dot. Thank you to our panel. Ms. Mayor, you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to say, just in regard to youth, when I took my daughter to college at Howard University, when they had the parent meeting, they said that we have over 30 or 40 religions on this campus. Now, if you haven't ingrained your children in your faith when they were growing up from children, then don't call us and say, what is this that my child has joined? Because you went to church and they stayed home and watched cartoons. You know, so you have to start young with children.
Thank you so much. So we don't have time for announcements today, but I do want to recognize two of our visitors. Please, gentlemen, if you would stand. We have some gentlemen from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Please tell us something about yourself.
Actually, my name is Marty Cuthbertson. I'm a retired CMPD officer in 2014. And I presently serve on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Crime Stopper Board, and we've been, I'm prior president, he's the president of the board right now, and we just came to see what you do and how you do it, and hopefully we'll come and maybe participate and or come and be a part of the panel and share what we do, all of you as to what we do and how we do it. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Adrian Johnson. I was a former Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Currently work for an IT company now doing regional security, physical security. I'm here, I'm just glad to be here. He told me about it at our board meeting. He kind of passed the torch down to me as being the Crime Stoppers coordinator, president currently. Born Charlottene, I went to Harding University High School, been in Charlotte all my life, grew up off West Boulevard. And I just want to look at Crime Stoppers from a different perspective as being more proactive than reactive. A lot of times, Crime Stoppers for being on the other end as far as locking people up, right? Getting that information, putting people in jail. But the thing is, the view that we have now, that we want the entire board to have, is how can we actually prevent crime? What do we need to do to get out in front of it, get involved in the community, and help these children become productive citizens? So that's what we look at it. That's how we look at it now. That's what we want to do. We want to get more involved in anything we can do. You start seeing either him or I in these meetings because that's the plan. It's not always about locking people up. It's about getting out in front of it, doing the right thing, being more proactive than reactive. So that's why we're here.
Bring some young people. Bring some young people.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This officially concludes today's episode of Tuesday Morning Forum. Next week we will talk about, boom, right there outside. If you look, that is Miss Darnell Ivory hugging Miss Nellie Ashford, artist. And we will discuss the legacy of her family. Goes back, the history, Titus Ivory, Reggie Hawkins, going back to the Richardsons. Ms. Darnell, impromptu. Ms. Ashford, come on. Because you got to sell us for next week. We really supposed to be out here, but come on. Tell us about your family. Just give us a brief.
Okay, brief. Civil rights, Reginald Hawkins, Cecil Ivory, and really the way that they were able to do that effectively was through Catherine Hawkins, Emily Ivory, Annie Richardson, and Bernice Martin Richardson, who was the mother, who worked at Johnson C. Smith, And so you'll get a little bit of that family history. And then we all grew up in McCrory Heights, which is a special place, and we can tell you on every street, every house, who the people were and what they did as a profession, because it was that tight of a community. And then we can talk about the changes of urbanization, because we had to move from Van Buren Avenue up to Hyde Park because city planning said eminent domain, you've got to go. But I'm going to share with you how my mom outsmarted the city on that eminent domain, forcing us to move. She outsmarted the city. She was a powerful woman. You talk about a supermom and a superwoman, Emily Ivory, Catherine Richardson, and Annie Richardson, and Bernice Martin. I know you want to talk about Cecil Ivory and Hawkins, but they couldn't have done it without those women.
We need to talk about granddad. Hello, tell me what your granddad do. Come on, we gotta go.
My grandfather was one, Reverend Newberry, who built First United Presbyterian Church, which was 7th Street. But he was the Latin professor at Johnson C. Smith, and I live on the street that's named after him, James Martin. He was that fabulous a man. But Paul Richardson has a story to tell too, because he was a barber, and he cut predominantly white people's hair, and had a barbershop downtown. Okay?
Oh, what about your father? What about Friendship 9? I thought there's so much history. But anyway, that's the conversation next week. Please join us right here at 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m., 10 a.m.-ish, because it can go long. You know, we have a good time right here at the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Morning Forum. Thank you so much. Send your announcements to S. Johnston at TuesdayForumCharlotte.org. We hope to see you next week. Dr. Thomas, play us out. Come on, Jasmine, hurry up. While people going.
All right, so I got a petition. Justice Riggs is still fighting for her seat, trying to get Griffin to stop this count. So if you can, please sign this petition to get Griffin to stop trying to split us up. Thank you so much.
All right. All right, Dr. Thomas. Wait a minute, Dr. Thomas. Wait a minute. Well, excuse me, folks. Miss Fanny Waterman. How are you? Ladies and gentlemen. Please, ladies and gentlemen. Please, I have to make this acknowledgement while we have the room. This is Miss Fanny Waterman. Can you please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the history you've made?
Good morning. My name is Fanny Waterman. I grew up here in Charlotte, the First Ward area. I think what he wants me to tell you is that in 1958, I was approached by a committee of the desegregation movement, Reverend Hawkins being one of the committee members. I was asked to be a pioneer, if I want to be a pioneer in the desegregation movement. I said yes, not really knowing the impact that it would cause, but I said yes. All of the students and the children in my neighborhood would always point, when they were asked by older people, what school are you going to go to when you grow up, they would say Second Ward or West Charlotte. And I would point to the school down the street, which I did not know that I could not go there, but they would laugh. And I said, why are you laughing? But these were grown people laughing, but they never told me why. It happened to have been Central High School. Okay, so ironically though, as time went on, in 1958, I entered a school, and that was Central High School, which turned into the Garinger High School later on, and I stayed there for 3 lonely years until I graduated in 1961. So when I always tell people, when you see this ring, it's not honorary. It was earned. My parents paid for it. I earned it. So I mean, it's just short. I can't go into everything. I had a lot of little instances. I know it's time you want to go and everything, but I appreciate the fact that you did notice me, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Living Black History right here in the flesh. Please don't bombard her, but come talk to her. Ask her questions about her experience. See if she's cool with you taking video. We have to learn and know your story. Thank you so much, Ms. Waterman. My bad, Steve. I know that drives you crazy. But it's necessary.
Thank you.